CNN Partner Hotels. Connected to your world.
On culinary journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
I'm Larry Madowo in Kilifi, Kenya, and this is CNN.
Hello everyone, I'm Zain Asher in New York, and this is One World. We are waiting to hear from the U.S. Attorney General on the review of the law enforcement response to last month's massacre at a Uvalde, Texas elementary school. But first, gut-wrenching testimonies in the U.S. Capitol Hill. Lawmakers have been hearing directly from Americans whose lives have been shattered by mass shootings. Among them, families of victims in both Uvalde, Texas and Buffalo, New York, as well as an 11-year-old girl who survived the Texas school massacre by smearing herself with the blood of a friend and pretending to be dead. Here's what she told the House in a recorded video.
He shot my friend that was next to me, and I thought he was going to come back to the room, so I grabbed the blood and put it all over me.
Do you feel safe at school? Why not?
Because I don't want it to happen again.
And you think it's going to happen again?
Lawmakers have been holding the hearings as they consider new laws to curb gun violence in America. The House of Representatives is set to debate two pieces of legislation this week, and the Senate, a bipartisan group, is trying to come up with a package that would address gun violence. They're considering narrow changes to laws. It's not yet clear when or if an agreement will be reached. CNN's Daniela Diaz joins us live now from the U.S. Capitol. So, Daniela, before we begin, I want to play our audience some really chilling, gut-wrenching, painful testimony from the mother of Lexi Rubio, describing what she saw and what exactly happened on that fateful day just 2 weeks ago at the Uvalde, Texas school shooting. Let's play it.
Lexi received the Good Citizen Award and was also recognized for receiving all A's. At the conclusion of the ceremony, we took photos with her before asking her to pose for a picture with her teacher, Mr. Reyes. That photo, her last photo ever, was taken at approximately 10:54 a.m. To celebrate, we promised to get her ice cream that evening. I told her we loved her and we would pick her up after school. I can still see her walking with us toward the exit. In the reel that keeps scrolling across my memories, she turns her head and smiles back at us to acknowledge my promise. And then we left. I left my daughter at that school, and that decision will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Kimberly Rubio there describing the last moments that she spent with her daughter Lexi before she was gunned down at an elementary school shooting just 2 weeks ago. It's impossible, Daniela, to hear those sorts of testimonies and not be moved. I was certainly moved to tears as I was listening to Kimberly. I'm sure you were too. Just explain to us what changes now.
Zain, I want to point out that Lexi Rubio's mother, Kimberly Rubio, while she was making this really strong plea to lawmakers on gun safety reform in the United States, she called for a ban on assault rifles and high-capacity magazines. That is what she wants Congress to do. But I want to note that this is not part of those bipartisan negotiations that we're seeing taking place in the Senate that started taking place 2 weeks after immediately in the wake of the Uvalde shooting that have been taking place in the last 2 weeks. Something that they're discussing, they're looking at juvenile records to be accessed during background checks. They're looking at raising the age potentially from 18 to 21 for purchasing those AR-15s, that weapon that was used in the Uvalde shooting. Other things they're looking at is hardening school security, providing more funding for mental health, but not banning assault rifles, which is what the parents of Lexi Rubio wanted when they were making this plea to mainly Republican lawmakers who have not budged on this issue of gun safety reform in the United States. Democrats are hoping that they can get at least 10 Republican senators, Zane, to get 60 votes in the Senate to be able to pass any sort of legislation on gun safety reform. A lot of Democratic leaders are saying at least something incremental will be okay. They just want something done on gun safety reform. And so hearing these witnesses, including Mia Cerrillo, who of course gave her own testimony in a video of her surviving the Uvalde shooting. She actually, as you said, smeared blood from her friend and played dead during the Uvalde shooting at that elementary school to be able to survive it. And she said she's not safe at school. These were really, really emotional words that we heard from her, from parents of shooting victims, and they're really hoping that they can reach lawmakers here and that there could be some sort of change on gun safety reform, Zane.
Yeah, I mean, the testimony from 11-year-old Mia Cerrillo was just, again, so difficult to listen to, something that no 11-year-old should have to go through, should have to explain or experience. How much pressure are Republicans under right now? I mean, a lot of people are saying that it sort of feels different this time. The level of pressure they're under this time feels different compared to other mass shootings in the past. What are your thoughts on that?
Zane, I've spoken to so many Democratic lawmakers who all say that this feels different than what happened in the wake of Sandy Hook, that shooting that happened years ago. They say that this is a time that they feel they need to take advantage of this momentum that they're sensing with Republicans. In fact, it's quite notable that there are even Republicans negotiating with Democrats on the issue of gun safety reform, something that has not happened in the past in the wake of terrible mass shootings in this country. There's a handful of Republicans that are at the table, the negotiating table with Democrats, including John Cornyn, who is a senator from Texas where this shooting took place. Even Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell privately saying in meetings that he is open to some sort of gun safety legislation. He actually gave his blessing to Cornyn to negotiate. So it does feel different, and they are feeling that pressure, and they're really, really hoping. Democratic leaders are saying they can hopefully get at least 10 Republicans on a deal by this week. They're trying to really capitalize on that momentum that they're feeling.
All right, Daniela Diaz, live for us there. Thank you so much. Actor Matthew McConaughey gave an impassioned speech on U.S. gun violence on Tuesday. The Uvalde, Texas native spoke from the White House press room podium, at times very emotional, other times visibly angry. He and his wife Camilla recently visited with the families of the Uvalde mass shooting, and he painted a poignant picture of the lives that were cut short in that school massacre.
Now, Alethea, her dream was to go to art school in Paris and one day share her art with the world. Ryan and Jessica were eager to share Alethea's art with us and said if we could share it, that somehow, maybe that would make Alethea smile in heaven. Maite wore green high-top Converse with a heart she had hand-drawn on the right toe because they represented her love of nature. Camilla's got these shoes. Can you show these shoes, please? Wore these every day. Green Converse with a heart on the right toe. These are the same green Converse on her feet that turned out to be the only clear evidence that could identify her after the shooting. How about that? Enough with the counterpunching. Enough of the invalidation of the other side. Let's come to the common table.
I want to take you to Washington now, where U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland is speaking about Uvalde mass shooting. Let's listen in.
And the country. But the independence and transparency and expertise of the Justice Department can go a long way toward assessing what happened in Uvalde with respect to the law enforcement response and to giving guidance for the future. And that's what we're here for today. The Justice Department is undertaking a critical incident review of the law enforcement response that day at the request of the Uvalde mayor. The review will be comprehensive, it will be transparent, and it will be independent. We will be assessing what happened that day. We will be doing site visits at the school. We will be conducting interviews of an extremely wide variety of stakeholders, witnesses, families, law enforcement, government officials, school officials, and we will be reviewing the resources that were made available after in the aftermath. The review will culminate in a final report, which will include our findings and recommendations, and it will be made public. The department's COPS office is leading the review. Our director, Rob Chapman, and our senior counselor, Shanetta Cutler, will be leading the team. And now I will be happy to introduce to you the team who will be doing the investigation. Chief Rick Brazil, who served as chief of the Sacramento Police Department and lead investigator on a number of critical incident reviews. Deputy Chief Gene Dysinger, who served as Deputy Chief of Police and Director of Threat Management for Virginia Tech, where he was recruited following the mass shooting there in 2007. Deputy Chief Frank Fernandez is a former Chief of Police and Police Practices expert for the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division since 2008. Albert Guarnieri, who is on the screen, who is joining us remotely. He currently serves with the FBI as the Unit Chief of the Violence Reduction Unit in the Office of Partner Engagement. He oversees the FBI's program that has trained over 110,000 law enforcement officers in active shooter preparation and response. Major Mark Lomax served for over 27 years with the Pennsylvania State Police, led national efforts to strengthen law enforcement tactical response as executive director for the National Tactical Officers Association, and as a manager for the IACP Center for Police Leadership and Training. Laura McElroy, who is also joining us remotely, is a communications strategist who has worked as a civilian police executive dedicated to bridging the gap between officers and the communities they serve. Sheriff John Mina led the Orlando Police Department through the mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub in 2016. Dr. April Naturel is a traumatic stress specialist who led one of the World Trade Center Health Program's outreach and education programs and was the architect of the behavioral health response to the Boston Marathon bombing. Finally, Chief Kristen Zeman led the Aurora Police Department through the mass shooting at a movie theater in 2012. As I said, nothing that these folks can do can undo the terrible tragedy that occurred and that we are just heartbroken about, but we can assess what happened and we can make recommendations for the future. I would also say that as we conduct this review, the Justice Department stands ready to participate, to support the bipartisan gun safety negotiations that are going on in Congress right now in any way that's possible. I think now we'll take a few questions. Yes.
If I may.
Of course.
Given the misstatements, how concerned are you about the lack of transparency so far down in Uvalde? And will this review have the tools it needs in case people decide that they do not want to cooperate?
So as I said, we've been invited by the mayor. We have been promised, assured, and welcomed with respect to cooperation by every level of law enforcement, state, federal, and local. And we'll participate in that vein. We don't expect any problems.
Mr. Attorney General, on the topic of gun violence, a man was arrested early this morning outside the home of Justice Brett Kavanaugh in Maryland with a gun and a knife, threatening to do harm to the justice. What is your reaction to this?
So this kind of behavior is obviously behavior that we will not tolerate. Threats of violence and actual violence against the justices, of course, strike at the heart of our democracy, and we will do everything we can to prevent them and to hold people who do them accountable. For that reason, last month, I accelerated the protection of all the justices' residences 24/7. Also last month, I met with the marshal of the court. I convened a meeting with her, as well as with the deputy director of the FBI, with the director of the Marshal Service, and with our own law enforcement, our own prosecutors, to ensure every degree of protection available as possible. Just yesterday, I met with Judge Salas and Judge Sullivan on the Judicial Security Committee of the Judicial Conference, and assured them of our complete support for their efforts with respect to judicial security. Mike?
General, when will this group be on the ground in Uvalde, and there's been some indication that at least some police officials, including the school police chief, have been somewhat uncooperative in the investigations that are already proceeding. What is the process for this team to gather information from people who may not cooperate in investigations, and is there any kind of compulsory process?
So the team is already working, and they will be on the ground as necessary, but they have already begun their work. And as I said, we expect voluntary cooperation from everybody at every level, and we have been promised that cooperation.
Is it possible? All right, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland there announcing that the U.S. Justice Department is going to be conducting a full review, a full investigation into the police response, the response by law enforcement to the Uvalde school shooting. He mentioned that it was the Uvalde mayor that invited the Justice Department to intervene, to investigate. The part of the investigation is going to be involving a visit to Robb Elementary School, interviewing witnesses, interviewing people who are on the ground, talking to teachers as well. There's going to be a report issued at the end of the investigation. And the goal here is really to try to see what mistakes were made and what lessons can be learned from the way law enforcement did or did not rather intervene that could have saved lives. And he expects there to be full cooperation from law enforcement officials at every level. All right, we'll have much more on this news after the break.
Culinary Journeys, in association with Ajinomoto.
Hi, I'm Chef Vicky Lau from Tate Dining Room and Bar and Mora. It's always been a goal of ours to receive a 2 Michelin star because I believe a restaurant needs to have something to look forward to, actually, to improve every day, because for us, every day is like a performance. Me as a chef, at the beginning, I was focusing a lot more on the innovation and the concept of a dish. And slowly, the technique part has built up from trying more different ways of cooking. And as a chef, I've evolved a lot from that.
The pandemic reminded us of how important diet is to health. That's why the Ajinomoto Group is committed to solving health issues around the world at the dinner table. A real solution means never settling for less.
ถึงแม้ว่าจะต้องลดความเค็มในอาหารลงแต่เราก็ต้องไม่ละทิ้งความอร่อยเราต้องการให้ทุกท่านได้เพลิดเพลินกับรสชาติความอร่อยของอาหารไปพร้อมกับสุขภาพที่ดี
A saúde é importante, mas queremos considerar também o legado do sabor regional. Como podemos melhorar o balanço nutricional mantendo o respeito à cultura gastronômica? Esse é o nosso desafio.
Tempat yang jauh pun bukan masalah. Kami selalu bisa menyediakannya. Kami terus mengupayakan dunia di mana siapapun bisa mengakses makanan bergizi dimanapun mereka berada.
We're here to provide nutritious meals to the entire world without compromising on taste, local ways of life, or accessibility, because that is nutrition without compromise.
Eat well, live well.
Ukraine is vowing it will not surrender the strategically vital eastern city of Severodonetsk to Russian forces. But a regional official says that Kyiv may pull back to more defensive positions, and he's warning the fierce fighting that has already leveled the area could get a lot worse as Moscow doubles down. Across the river, the governor says Lysychansk is also getting pummeled by artillery, with Russian troops purposefully aiming at humanitarian headquarters. The Kremlin also appears to be tightening its grip in southeastern Ukraine. According to Reuters, Russian news agencies report the occupied part of Zaporizhzhia region, home to Europe's largest nuclear power plant, is set to hold a referendum on joining Russia later on this year. Millions of Ukrainians have made the difficult decision to flee their homes and their country in search for safety. But there are the few who decide to stay as the war comes ever closer, like those in the city of Sloviansk who explained why to CNN's Ben Wiedemann.
Where's the order of this vote?
At 3 years old, Ivan doesn't know war rages around him. He doesn't really understand it yet, says his father Igor. For him, it's just boom, boom. We try to explain it's only a loud car passing by. Ivan's mother, Ksenia, shows where they live. Neighbors who left the city of Sloviansk let them move into their ground floor apartment because it's safer. The hallway is full of bottled water. The bathtub is full. There's been no running water here for weeks. As the air raid siren blares, those who remain behind wait for food supplies at a distribution center. We're staying, says Zeneda. My neighbor has a well. I have dogs and 2 cats. My husband has diabetes. 64-year-old Nikolai shrugs off the danger of staying put. Where can I go if they bomb everywhere, he asks me. You can't escape your fate. Galina fled her village nearby on the front lines. It was very hard there, she says. There was a lot of shelling. Half the village disappeared. Her son-in-law and her daughter are taking her away. Every day people gather for buses out of Sloviansk. The war, now into its 4th month, has seen millions flee their homes. With no end in sight, a sense of resignation and exhaustion has set in. Some who leave may never return. Katya's mother and father have come to say goodbye.
Actually, I didn't plan to leave, but I decided to leave because the situation is getting more and more dangerous.
Her parents will stay behind, even as a part of them leaves. Ben Wiedemann, CNN, Sloviansk, Ukraine.
Now to a deadly incident in Berlin where a car plowed into a crowd of people in a busy shopping area in the capital and then crashed into a store. Police say one woman, who was a teacher, was killed. Several others were injured, including some high school students as well. The driver is currently being examined at a hospital. Senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen, who's normally based in Germany, is actually joining us on this story from Moscow. So Fred, what more do we know about the driver at this point and what happened?
Hi there, Zane. Well, one of the things that we have been able to get from the Berlin police is they say, first of all, they don't know whether or not this was a deliberate incident or some sort of accident, whether this car might have gone out of control. However, they are saying that the driver is a 29-year-old Armenian German who's also a resident of Berlin. You can actually see on the video that we're showing on screen right now that the car has the license plates that starts with B, which means it's registered in Berlin, and they have now confirmed that the driver is a resident of Berlin. Apparently, after all of this took place, he was actually apprehended by passers-by and then handed over to authorities. So it was people who were around the scene who actually managed to apprehend the driver of that vehicle as he was apparently trying to go away from the scene. The other thing that the Berlin police are saying is that this seems to be an accident that maybe, or an incident that didn't take place over a long period of time, but certainly over a larger distance. Apparently what happened is that the car rolled onto the pavement and then hit a group of people on the sidewalk, then actually went back onto the road, drove further down the road, then went back on the pavement and finally wound out inside that storefront that you're seeing on your screens right now. Obviously something that put a lot of people in Berlin into great shock. And again, we've been saying one person killed, apparently a school teacher, several school students from another state in Germany also injured in that incident, some of them with life-threatening injuries. So a really awful incident that took place there in Berlin as the authorities are still trying to piece together whether or not this was an accident or whether or not there might have been some sort of other motive at play. Zane?
All right, Fred Pleitgen, live for us there. Thank you so much. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson was greeted with cheers and boos as he walked into Parliament earlier. It was his first time taking questions from lawmakers since surviving a no-confidence vote earlier this week. The Prime Minister defiantly vowed that nothing and no one would stop him from doing his job despite the intentions of his opponents. And he says his political career is just getting started.
In a long political career so far, I have, of course, picked up, barely begun, I have, of course, picked up political opponents all over the place. And that is because this government has done some very big and very remarkable things which they did not necessarily approve of.
The Prime Minister is under pressure for breaking COVID-19 lockdown rules and getting fined by police as well. All right, coming up here on One World, calls for gun control are getting louder in the US after multiple mass shootings. We'll speak with one survivor about what lawmakers can do to turn things around.
We're here at the home of one of the FSB team. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
What do you want the world to know?
People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy. I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you. Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their stories.
On Culinary Journeys, meet Japan's Natsuko Shoji, a chef earning rave reviews. Inspired by art, she is a rising star in French cuisine and in an industry where men dominate. See how she overcame life's challenges despite the odds and is now paving the way for a new generation. Culinary Journeys, Sunday on CNN, in association with Ajinomoto.
It is actually very complicated to move money around the world. Few companies can do it at scale. Few companies can do it in the number of countries that we do it. And so these companies that come together, like MoneyGrams and like our competitors, do really provide a very unique service, and that is to instantly move money, get funds from the United States to Mexico, literally in sub-seconds. For the ability to take $350 that you worked hard to earn and get it back to your mother, so that she can pick it up in Mexico, use it for food, healthcare, housing, is actually a very unique service. If you're from many of the countries, Mexico, Philippines, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, some of the largest receive markets in the world, it's absolutely critical to the lives of the consumers in those countries. But many people don't appreciate that. If it's not the life that you live, then it's not something that you really ever really get involved in.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Hello and welcome back to One World. Let's catch up on the headlines. The corruption trial for former FIFA president Sepp Blatter and French football legend Michel Platini got underway today in a Swiss courtroom, but proceedings were adjourned until Thursday after Blatter said he was having chest pains. The men deny accusations that they defrauded FIFA of more than $2 million. A passenger train has derailed in eastern Iran near the city of Tabas. The Iranian Red Crescent says that at least 17 people were killed and 50 more were injured. The train, carrying 348 passengers, collided with an excavator on the rail, according to state media. The families of 2 men who went missing in the Brazilian Amazon want authorities to intensify their search. British journalist Dom Phillips and Bruno Pereira, an Indigenous affairs expert, were in the remote Javari Valley on Sunday. Phillips was researching a book on conservation efforts there. Uvalde, Buffalo, Orlando, each one of these American cities has experienced the terror of a mass shooting, and each one has caused unimaginable pain in different ways. In Uvalde, it was the devastation of losing children, especially in a place where they're supposed to be the safest. In Buffalo, it was the cruelty of racism as a killer targeted a predominantly black community. And in Orlando, almost 6 years ago today, a popular gay venue suffered what President Biden called the deadliest attack against the LGBTQ+ community. After each tragedy, we've heard desperate pleas for action like this.
To the lawmakers who feel that we do not need stricter gun laws, let me paint a picture for you. My son, Zaire, has a hole in the right side of his neck, 2 on his back, and another on his left leg, caused by an exploding bullet from an AR-15. As I clean his wounds, I can feel pieces of that bullet in his back. Shrapnel will be left inside of his body for the rest of his life. Now I want you to picture that exact scenario for one of your children.
Senator Everhart there speaking about what happened to her child in the Buffalo mass shooting. Still, despite these urgent calls, little has actually been done to stop these massacres. Time now for the exchange and a conversation with a survivor of the Orlando nightclub shooting. Brandon Wolf lost several friends in the attack almost 6 years ago. He says he's had enough of empty promises from elected officials and is urging them to back up their words with actions. Here's what he told lawmakers back in 2019.
I'm not the first person who's lost loved ones in a shooting fueled by hate. There are people like me in Charleston, Pittsburgh, San Diego, El Paso, and so many more. And the fact is, there are actions that this Congress, that you, can take right now to push back against hate and violence.
Brandon Wolf joins me live now. Brandon, when I watched your testimony, I thought it was incredibly moving. I mean, you really painted a clear picture of what you experienced on that fateful day, and just we all mourned with you as you grieved 2 very, very close friends. When you testified before Congress just 3 years ago, did you genuinely expect that something would be different, that things would change in this country?
Well, I'll tell you this. First of all, it's lovely to be on. Thank you so much. And thank you for keeping all eyes on this issue as those powerful families show courage in traveling to Washington, D.C. I'll say this. I run on hope because, as I've said to others, it's about all I've got left. Everything that I loved and cared for was ripped away from me almost 6 years ago in a place that was supposed to be safe for people like me. And so I have hope. I had hope then, I have hope today that we can continue to push forward, that we can make progress on this issue. But I'm also not naive. I know that the current makeup of the United States Senate and their obsession with this archaic filibuster rule have allowed them to coast from crisis to crisis, host a few hearings here and there, look like they care, and offer thoughts and prayers only to serve up more of the status quo. I know that that's holding us back today, but I also know that there's a groundswell of support for common sense gun safety measures. I know that those things are broadly popular in this country, and it feels to me like we're reaching a tipping point. You heard it from, Matthew McConaughey yesterday from the White House podium that something has to change. We're all in agreement that the way we're doing things just isn't working. Our experiment of guns on every street corner simply is not working, and it's getting our children killed. So while I'm not naive to the process and to the things holding us back, I still hold on to that hope that this community, this society, this country can come together to get something done.
Does it feel different this time, though? I mean, a lot of people thought that after Sandy Hook we would see a lot of change, and of course we didn't. Now, the second time this country's seen a mass shooting at an elementary school, and this time we're actually seeing and hearing from survivors, children talking about, an 11-year-old girl actually talking about smearing herself in her friend's blood so that the shooter would think that she was dead. I mean, again, no 11-year-old should have to experience anything like that. Does it feel different this time, though, do you think, Brandon?
I hope so. And you know, to your point, the stories of people who are directly impacted are the ones that change hearts and minds. It's really easy in this country, because so many of these shootings happen all the time, for lawmakers to rely on us getting numb to the numbers, that it's, you know, it's 27 here, 17 there, another 21 somewhere else, it's 49 at Pulse nightclub, and those numbers can make you feel a little bit numb to the reality of what's happening, but those aren't just numbers. They're missing faces at birthday parties. They're empty seats at dinner tables. They're, you know, cards and phone calls that you never get again. And in this case, they are children. And these children are crying out for help. I think hearing the stories of survivors, hearing the stories of parents who've had to bury their loved ones, those are the things that begin to change hearts and minds. And I do think what you're hearing across this country is a consensus, even from registered Republicans and certainly from gun owners, that they agree something is broken. Something is fundamentally broken about the way we have allowed our obsession with easy access to firearms to cost the lives of our children. And at least what I've been hearing anecdotally across the country, not just here in Florida, but also in Texas, I was there last weekend, is that people want to find some solution. They don't know what it is yet today. They're not sure if we're going to be able to bridge all of our gaps, but they want something to change. No one wants to send their kids to school and worry that they might be bringing them home in a body bag anymore.
Yeah, and we're seeing, you know, obviously some movement in that there is a bipartisan group of senators that are working towards some possible gun reform. We could see a deal as early as this week, possibly. But in your opinion, as someone who has survived a mass shooting, I mean, you talked about that awful night. You were in the bathroom, you heard gunshots ring out, you know, you looked for your friends, you called them multiple times, they didn't answer, you realized that they were gone. What does need to change specifically, Brandon?
Well, we know what needs to change. And I appreciate you bringing it back to the humanity, because that's what's at the core of this, is that, you know, worlds are being ripped apart. Whole communities are being shattered. My best friends were my chosen family. They were my brothers, and I called them hundreds, if not thousands of times, desperate to know that they might wake up, that maybe one of them was in a hospital bed somewhere, but unfortunately, they took 19 rounds from an assault rifle between the two of them and never made it home to say goodbye to their parents. That is simply fundamentally unacceptable in an industrialized country, and one that claims to be exceptional. And so we know what we could do tomorrow. We could expand background checks in this country to include online sales and folks who are at gun shows. We could implement a national red flag law that allows people to be temporarily removed from their firearms when we know they're a danger to themselves and others. We could raise the age of purchase to 21. And by the way, those are things that we did in the state of Florida, that Republicans led in the state of Florida in 2018 after the shooting at Parkland. These things are not as difficult as they're made out to be by leaders in Congress. These things really do have bipartisan and broad support. We're not talking about disrespecting the Second Amendment. We're talking about respecting law-abiding gun owners by not simply handing out guns to people who shouldn't have them, by saying that if you're going to own and wield a firearm, you should be responsible, you should know how to use it, you should have it safely stored. And we don't want to have those things falling into the hands of people that we already know are going to use them to commit acts of mass violence against other people. Those are common sense reforms. They're broadly agreed upon. We already have the legislative framework there. Now we just need some political willpower to get them over the finish line.
Yeah, and this Sunday it will be the 6th year anniversary of that Pulse nightclub shooting. Our thoughts are with you, Brendan. Our thoughts are with the families of your two very, very good friends, and thank you for using your voice to speak up on this issue.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Right. Lawyers for more than 90 women and girls who were sexually abused by former USA gymnastics team Dr. Larry Nassar have submitted claims to the FBI. They're seeking more than $1 billion, saying investigators could have protected other victims had they not mishandled the case. The claimants include Simone Biles and Ali Raisman, two of the biggest names in just gymnastics. Golf and controversy rarely said in the same breath, but that's not the case for the LIV Golf tournament. Some of golf's biggest players tee off in the controversial first event Thursday. Saudi Arabia, which is backing the tournament, is accused of pumping money into high-profile events, in part to distract from its human rights record. The purse for this first event is $25 million. Phil Mickelson walked back comments he made about the Saudis and will be playing in the event. Dustin Johnson and Kevin Na quit the PGA Tour to play. And we've just learned that Bryson DeChambeau is next to sign up for the tournament. Is this the future of golf? Let's bring in Alex Thomas, live in St. Albans, England. Alex, just walk us through this. What's the latest?
Yeah, I mean, this is where sport and geopolitics, not for the first time, Zain, are colliding. Backed by the billions of dollars of Saudi Arabia's private investment fund, this LIV Golf Invitational Series that launches tomorrow, Thursday my time, here in the UK at the Centurion Club just outside London, is set to fundamentally change professional men's golf, perhaps forever, but it hasn't come without its controversy. As you were mentioning, with the Saudi links and the Arab nation being accused of sports washing when you use the glory of sport, the popularity of sport to clean up your image, in Saudi's case for human rights abuses and alleged state-sponsored killings, then obviously it becomes a moral choice potentially for players whether or not to be involved. Their poster boy is Phil Mickelson, really the golden boy of golf for 3 decades, even during the Tiger Woods era, but the curtain was unveiled into what he's like maybe behind that public persona when comments he made about working with the Saudis and how scary they were unveiled by a golf writer. He apologized but took his longest ever hiatus from the sport, 4 months, reappearing earlier on Wednesday to face the media in what was a half-hour grilling, and this is what he said about the core issue.
I don't condone human rights violations at all. I don't think nobody here does throughout the world, and I'm certainly aware of what has happened with Jamal Khashoggi, and I think it's terrible. I've also seen the good that the game of golf has done throughout history, and I believe that LIV Golf is going to do a lot of good for the game as well.
Saying a month or two ago, this project seemed dead in the water because it looked like everyone was trying to get as far away from it as possible. Now they have Mickelson, a World Golf Hall of Famer, Dustin Johnson, a former world #1 as recently as last year, on board. And as you say, only in the last few hours, reports that Bryson DeChambeau, a major champion and the man in golf with his power hitting just a couple of years ago, is sure to jump ship from the PGA Tour as well. The appeal for the players is clear: shorter tournaments, fewer of them through the year, millions and billions of dollars at stake, and it all kicks off here on Thursday. It could be an absolute game changer for the sport of golf.
And just talk to us about just really the amount of money that is pumped into this sport quickly, Alex.
Well, for example, Phil Mickelson and Dustin Johnson are going to make more from this venture alone than they have in a combined 45 years on the PGA Tour. And just for this one event, each of them are going to make more than Tiger Woods has earned in his entire career.
Right, Alex Thomas, live for us there. Thanks so much. And thank you for watching One World. I'm Zain Asher. African Voices up next. You're watching CNN.
African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities. Impact communities. Transform lives. Hear their stories next. In association with Glow.
We share this place, we all belong. We have to restore this planet's soul. Give it water, give it sun, room to grow. I can see a better tomorrow. I can see a better tomorrow.
Nonviolence means feeling oneness with all living beings. And part of that is wanting freedom for all living beings. My name is Sadhvi Sadali Shri. I'm a Jain monk and filmmaker based in Dallas, Texas. I became a Jain monk in 2008 after serving in the Iraq War. I was deployed and I experienced a lot of violence. And I experienced it emotionally and mentally when I came back going through PTSD. A couple of years ago, another monk and I were talking about sexual abuse, and we knew as monks we wanted to raise awareness about the taboo subject. We didn't know about human trafficking yet. And so when we decided to raise awareness, we wondered, what are we going to do? And we didn't have any film experience, but we knew by making films, we could educate many people. Surviving Sex Trafficking is my second film, and we wanted to follow the journey of healing of the survivors featured in the film. So we traveled around the world and also within the United States. And it was important to us to know their journey and to see if they can truly heal. Is there hope?
Want a daily dose of Fareed and his team? Now you can get it with Fareed's Global Briefing, the newsletter that gives you the best insight and analysis on global affairs. Go to cnn.com/Fareed to sign up.
African Voices Changemakers, in association with Glow Unlimited.
In South Africa, we meet a man who's taken the plunge into an Arctic seafaring career, and he's inspiring others to do the same along the way. This is Cape Town, and aboard the SA Agulhas II, Captain Knowledge Bengu has returned from a historic voyage he'll never forget.
It was it's very euphoric on many levels, partly because we were part of a century-long history, and I never thought I would set eyes on her at this day and age. I'm a captain of a polar research vessel and explore some of the most remote places on Earth. I am Captain Knowledge Bengu, and I am a change maker.
Captain Knowledge Bengu's own journey began south of the port city of Durban on South Africa's east coast.
The house actually where I grew up is up here on the left, and Cecil Luatla, the man that made me go to see his house, also is up here on the left.
Captain Bengu's journey has taken him from his childhood home to some of the most dangerous seas on the planet.
When I grew up in Umlazi, my first dream was to become a medical doctor. As the time went by, I started realizing that, hang on, maybe I could change to this seagoing career and I can make a remarkable change to how people perceive the sea. Because as the in the black community, people are terrified of water, terrified of careers involving seagoing. So when I had this opportunity, then I just didn't hesitate.
With his mind made up, he started studying further to pursue his nautical dream.
So this is when I was at Natal Technikon doing maritime studies. I was in one of the computer labs.
Through hard work, he moved quickly through the ranks.
Good thing about the seagoing career is that there's no shortcuts, and meaning that you have to go through different ranks. This is the SA Agulhas, the predecessor of the SA Agulhas II. This is the ship that gave me my first polar experience in 2003. I served on her as a cadet, third officer, second officer, chief officer, and also had the command. When this vessel was delivered in 2012, I was transferred straight from the Agulhas to Agulhas II.
10 years ago, Captain Bengu decided to focus on acquiring the skills that would allow him to explore these icy waters.
This is a group photograph of all the participants during my year in 2012, where I attended an ice navigation course in Chile. So this is me over there. So the next Antarctic voyage that year, I was an ice pilot. And then following that year, and then I was then promoted to the captain on this very same vessel.
The Agulhas II is a world-class research vessel, and though Captain Bengu is now a veteran of Antarctic exploration, he admits it's a challenging place to work.
The last expedition was my 14th time going to Antarctica, and I always get surprised. The conditions are never the same. So you are trained to be able to anticipate things before they even happen. And all that is almost like embedded in your sort of like your polar DNA, if I can call it that, you know. So there are no shortcuts. It's all based on experience. Don't tell the ice tells you where to go.
Next, we'll join Captain Bengu on an expedition to find perhaps the world's most sought-after shipwreck.
₦20,000 for free. 20,000 naira bonus. Is your line blocked? Then move to Glow.
I'm reconnected.
Because we've all reconnected. And it's simple. Dial *109# and link your NIN to your new or existing Glow number. Get up to 20,000 naira for free with Glow.
20,000 naira bonus free.
Yes, so free.
Nigel, what are you waiting for?
June 20th, a CNN concert event. Let's celebrate, educate, and lift every voice. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 80,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
In late 2021, Captain Knowledge Bengu left his home outside Amanzi Mtoti on the KwaZulu-Natal coast of South Africa to head to Cape Town and then to Antarctica.
Antarctica is a beautiful place. I went twice as a cadet. I went a few times as a third officer, a few times as a second navigating officer, a few times as a chief navigating officer, and plenty times as a master. I can never tell you that if the next voyage to Antarctica will be a breeze.
Captain Bengu's journey from cadet to captain has been a remarkable one.
I do believe it was a calling for me, partly because of how I excelled the moment I got into the career.
When he's not at sea, Captain Bengu is part of an organization working to make young people aware of opportunities within the maritime sector through a school outreach program called Marico.
We show different positions within the maritime network, and it also helps kids to know that even if they don't go to sea, they can still participate in the maritime chain.
He has also taken part in creating educational booklets.
The schools that are underprivileged, that don't have internet access, we have to have hard copies. We print it out as we need, and we distribute it to schools.
In February 2022, he reported for duty at the helm of the world-class research vessel, the Agulhas II.
I was requested by name to do we left Cape Town on the 5th of February at 1800, and we were headed to the Weddell Sea.
The expedition would traverse the notoriously stormy waters of the Southern Ocean to the icy seas around Antarctica. Their aim, to find perhaps the world's most elusive shipwreck.
When we arrived in Antarctica, it was around the 17th of February, and that's when we started our search for the Endurance.
Captain Bengu first heard of Anglo-Irish explorer Ernest Shackleton and his vessel, the Endurance, 20 years ago.
Well, I became aware of Shackleton from when I joined the Old Agulhas It was 2002, but I never thought to be, I would have to one day go and locate the endurance.
Expedition leader polar geographer John Shears has more than 30 years' experience exploring the Arctic and Antarctic.
The story of Shackleton, I think, has resonated down the ages. It's an incredible story of survival. And I think people have all